Welcome everyone to this week's episode, and today I'm joined with a good friend of mine, but an absolute legend in Ali Terai. Now, Ali and I had a bit of a chance meeting a few years ago, and what blossomed out of a simple round of golf is something that's pretty unique in my life. And I've often said to Ali, it's pretty difficult to meet new old friends, and Ali's certainly one of those. But in addition to that, he's got a pretty amazing story of just trying things. I mean, Ali will tell you himself he's a bit of a dart thrower, and we are quite different in a lot of ways, but a lot of the darts he's thrown have come off, but it's not without its fair share of hiccups. And I'll bring him up in a sec, but I'm not sure if I'm not sure, mate, if you've seen, but Matthew McConaughey's got a new book out called Green Lights, and I don't know if you're challenging him for interesting stories with the life that you put together.
Oh, yeah, nice. Nice segue into Matthew McConaughey. I haven't seen the book, but I'm sure it'll be interesting. I saw it pop up in a couple of podcasts where I think he's done interviews, but mate, he's got a ripping story.
Mate, he's amazing. I think I saw an interview and he was just talking about some of the ones that were in there, and just incredible sort of a life. It's so hard not to like the guy. Like, he's had so much dark in his life and so much light, and it's just it's really cool to see it. But thanks for doing this, mate.
Yeah, I love we started with Matthew McConaughey. That's brilliant.
It's all down. Oh, you remind me a lot of him. So
it's the looks. It's definitely the looks.
And the accent and just, just the vibe.
The twang. Yeah,
it's the vibe, man.
Awesome.
Hey, I do have a bit of well, I guess probably this is another good segue. You are, like Matthew McConaughey, a very, very awarded man. I've got a little something up. You know me, I always like to prepare something before. Here's something I prepared earlier for you, my friend.
Here we go.
The winner for the 2019 Telstra Victorian Small and Succeeding Award winner is, drum roll, come on, Future Golf. Woo!
Wow, well, it's an absolute honour to win this award, and I'm really glad that we ditched the golf polo shirts and hired these tuxes. Future Golf launched back in 2014 when we both had hair. The idea was really simple. Could we do something with golf that changed it, that allowed and introduced a younger generation to get into the game? And it was pretty much that simple. We wanted to make golf less intimidating. We wanted to make it more accessible and more flexible. And very early on in our journey, there was a funny moment. We were trying to get our first partners on board, and I spoke to this industry stalwart. And he was very honest with me, and he said, Ali, this is by far the stupidest idea that I've ever heard. And no one will want to do this, and if you guys are around in 3 months, I will eat my hat. So
I'm going to cut it there because I didn't want you to have to make your bad joke.
Oh, that was the worst. I'm like sweating just watching that back.
I cut it before. See, I'm flattering. Mate, how good was that? Not only did you look $1,000,000, but congratulations. I'm so proud of you. And mate, talk me through. It's a long journey from, like you said, from an idea with a few mates to standing on stage, taking a trophy. And how's it back? Like, I guess now sitting back looking at it, do any of them feel real?
Yeah, well, that was a really interesting point in time in our journey. There's a funny story, probably even leading into that award sequence, is when we were going through. So the Telstra Business Awards, it's a pretty long process. It takes about 5-6 months. They do a number of interviews. They come out, they meet the team, they do all these bits and pieces. So when we actually found out that we were a finalist, I think that awards ceremony was like September, October. We found out that we were finalists, I think maybe June, July. And then they send you an email saying, oh, well, congratulations, there's going to be this big gala dinner. Do you want to buy tickets for your colleagues, your family members, and all of that? Then the pricing of the tickets come through. And we're midwinter at that point. We've just realized that we've overspent in a lot of areas. The business is in a very unique position just because we had a couple of sort of testing months. And me and Rowan were sitting there, my general manager, and we're sitting there having a chat, and we're like, geez, mate, like this is amazing that we've been nominated for this award, but I genuinely don't know if we can afford tickets to go to this thing. Like till we have the cash flow for it. And, luckily we were able to recover it and we got back to a pretty decent position by the time of the awards night. But yeah, the original plan would have had a lot more of the team members that are part of Future Golf at that awards night. But it was just such an interesting roller coaster. And I think it just defines business in the best sense that 1 minute you can be standing up there accepting an award, but a couple of months prior to that, you're sitting there figuring out how you're going to pay wages in 2 to 4 weeks. So it's this really interesting paradox, I think. But that moment was super special. I think it just sort of validated everything that we'd done for the last 5 years prior to that. It was a nice culmination to that startup journey and that chapter of putting that stupid idea out there and I guess getting some sort of recognition. But as you know, it's not like those things are great, but it's more about the actions and the strategies and all the things that we've learned throughout that process that we really look back on. But what a cool moment to be able to celebrate it, like hugging the big man there at 6'6". He gobbled me up, which was really nice. And it's a special moment that we'll never forget. So
bonded you in paradise.
Yeah. He's got such big arms. It's like you just nestle in there. It's beautiful thing.
And the calf power that he has is extreme. I'm surprised you found a tuck pant.
Yeah, he had to hire one. There wasn't any off the rack.
He had to cut the leg out of the side, a little bit of the stretchy elastic. But mate, obviously I'm familiar with Future Golf. You are as well. But for those who may not be as familiar with what it is, why don't you share a little bit about the idea behind it, what it's done, and it might be nice to have validation from Telstra and the awards and that sort of thing. But I think once people start looking into it, they'll see that the validation actually comes from the people who are members, and sure. It's very much about that, isn't it? I mean, awards are nice, but you would take the accolades of your members and the people that are getting benefit from it any day, I'm sure, right?
Yeah, for sure. Like if I look back on it now, like the whole business is based on a golf community and a really engaged golf community that's not really a traditional golfer, I guess. And that's one part of it. And then the other bit is trying to create value through the partnerships that we have. And especially in golf, given that, it's hard for golf clubs to market out to younger members, to non-traditional golfers, to people that are new to the game, that are picking it up. And I just sort of love that connection that over the years we've been able to build these really awesome industry relationships, using a partnership model that is quite unique, but then connecting that to a community that just absolutely that loves the game and wants to get out there and meet people. And, like we met through you posting around on one of our lounges after moving down to Melbourne from Sydney. And, that chance meeting, it's amazing what the game of golf can do and how it connects people. And, when you go back to that whole thing about a passion-based business, like we've spoken about this a lot, like this thing, like I always wanted it to be a business, but this was really the project to learn the art of business. And then I always had the intention of starting a real business that would, be the commercial business, the more traditional one. But as life has it, the passion one just always kept drawing us back. And every time I'd look somewhere else, you mentioned at the top of the show, throwing darts, those darts wouldn't stick, but the Future Golf dart was always kind of on the board. And even now, it's still the thing that keeps drawing us in, and where the energy goes, where the focus goes for the most part, and just love it. It's great. So, yeah, man.
And you mentioned the lounge, and I guess in terms of if you could break it down into a simple sort of package for those who'd be like, okay, I'm new to golf, I'm looking at it. What does it mean versus like joining a golf club, right? Like, how does it differ from that?
Yeah, I think that the easiest way that when I'm explaining it nowadays, it's like it's the Uber Eats or the Class Pass for golf, where it's a more flexible alternative and a membership model. So say if you look at golf previously, 10 years ago, to play golf regularly, you had to join a private club. For a lot of people, if you weren't familiar with the game, that was a little bit intimidating. The pricing's obviously quite high. There's a few other barriers that are sometimes involved with that in terms of getting, applying for your membership, getting recommendations. So I guess what Future Golf really does is it gives people a middle ground where they can have a more flexible, accessible membership that includes things like their rounds of golf, course discounts, golf lessons, getting a golf handicap, being able to connect with a like-minded community. It just kind of gives that, I guess, an easier access point into the game that maybe isn't that intimidating, and provides sort of a pathway for people to learn the game and start loving it like we did.
And I think we could nerd out and talk golf forever, but there's two elements. I guess there's that, but that's the fun part, right? Like you've taken something that you could spend all your days talking about doing, connecting over, and you've turned it into something that actually looks after your family, looks after other people's families, and looks after the people that are and members. And I think that's the really cool part, because I mean, I look at myself. There's the element of a business. Like I love insurance, but there comes a time where you go to a barbecue on a weekend, and the last thing I want to do is say, "Oh, hey, what do you do?" And I'm like, I sometimes just say I'm in finance, right? Like I'm just in finance, like because I don't want to go down that path. A, I don't find it very interesting for other people, and B, everybody seems to have an opinion about what it is that you do. But I think the difference and what I've really admired about what you've done is you've taken things that were things that you'd do if you weren't paid, and you've then turned them into these things that have become something that have allowed you to live a life that you want for you and your family as well. So how has that been? I mean, you started started with Monash, you started working in a normal job, and then you pretty quickly it wasn't for you. But how has that been from that journey that a lot of people want to do, but often don't have the courage or conviction to go ahead and do it?
Yeah, it's a great question, mate. Like, I think for me, it probably wasn't really all that much of an option, just because of how much I struggled being, call it, your traditional employee. And it goes back to when I was a kid. Like I've always struggled with normal structure, whether it's school or uni or work or whatever it is. But I've had this strange relationship with all of those systems where I've done relatively okay in all of them, but using a really unique method where it probably wouldn't be recommended. It's quite different, probably uncomfortable for a lot of people. But like if I go back to even my schooling days, probably attended 2 days a week, 3 days a week. When I go back even to working days, I was always looking for how could I have the most impact with the least amount of, like, call it effort. Like I'd sit there and, well, not effort, like it was still a lot of hard work, but I'd look at my colleagues that were there at 7 a.m. and, until 7 p.m. But then I'd be like, well, what did you actually achieve in that 12-hour block? And then you'd see a couple of others where they'd have 2, 3, 4 moves during the week, but they were the ones that were ascending. They were the ones generating all the value. And that's probably what I gravitated to. So when I look at that kind of thing, I think that the working, call it traditional 9-to-5 relationship that I had, that was probably going to end at some point pretty soon anyway, just because it wasn't really in my wheelhouse. But in saying that, I learned so much. Like that was the apprenticeship, learning, and I had a pretty amazing job at the time. Like I got to do some really cool things with a lot of really amazing people. So when I look back at that chapter, wouldn't change it for the world. But I think the goal was always to then create something that, I really could align it to that next level with what I was about, which is really around creating things, formulating ideas. I love strategy, love making plans, and then executing those and seeing them come to fruition. So entrepreneurship or starting a passion project was a pretty good fit. I think it's like a natural progression.
And I think it's interesting because I don't think it's binary. I don't know what you think, but I don't think it's necessarily just binary to say that you either work for someone or you have your own business. Because I think that if you put you or I or someone else with similar mindset, you want to bring that sort of thinking to a company. And sure. There's definitely, look, there's easier ways to make money than have your own business, right? I'm sure you attested to it before. Like you're perceived to be winning an award, yet the question's how do we buy tickets to go? Versus, I mean, when you're at Monash, it was like, how many trips did you do to different places? And the moment that you left home, you had the work credit card, you had the hotel paid for, everything that you ever spent. And so they're just different, right? Like you're not a different person in either setting. So for people that are sitting there thinking that the only way that I can have control over that stuff is to have my own business, I don't necessarily agree. But and I think you are the best I've ever seen at talking about that with other people. And I think that's, you've been really strong and you've had these convictions that you had the confidence to have that conversation early. And I wonder where that came from, mate. Like in terms of that, have you thought about that at all? Like where the confidence to challenge like output versus effort or time, I guess is what I've looked at with you.
Yeah, I think it's hard to pinpoint it. Like, it's like with all things. I think upbringing probably has a bit to do with it. Like, I had a pretty unique upbringing growing up as an only child. On one hand, I had my mum who's like completely, like always just filled me with confidence and really warm personality that was, just always about like, you just do whatever, it'll always pan out. She just had this, like, even though we grew up really modestly, and that would be kind, putting it that way. There was always this sort of underlying feeling that, well, the world's your oyster, so you go play in it how you want to, kind of thing. And then on the other side, I had my relationship with my dad, which was completely different, where he was an alcoholic. He really struggled with always wanting to do stuff, but the world not being able to allow him to do those bits and pieces. And we had a pretty, average relationship for the most part. So, but he also had a lot of street smarts, and he had a way that he would go through the world that was, again, not the way that you would recommend people to do it. At times very, very aggressive and out there. But I saw that from both of them, and they probably both did this in their own different ways. Siri. They both had their unique ways of approaching the world that wasn't conventional. Like my upbringing was just so unique to everything that I saw with my mates and my friends. But I think what it also showed me from a young age that, there's different ways to live life. You don't have to do it just in the mold that everyone says that you have to. And I probably learned a lot from what not to do as well by looking at some of my parents as examples. But I think that was the starting point of that, where growing up in that environment where, like every morning when I'd wake up, the question wasn't why aren't you ready for school? It was, are you going to school today? Which I think is pretty different when you're growing up. So, and then from that, it was like, well, but I think internally I still didn't want to be a failure, right? Like I wanted to use the freedom and the flexibility I had, because I still wanted to make mum proud and ensure that her investment in caring for me and being that amazing parent was repaid. So I think that there was like that little thing around, all right, well, I've got this level of freedom and flexibility, but let's try to use it so it results in something productive.
It's cool. And I think you said before that it's an unusual upbringing, and it's difficult for other people around you sometimes. And I've certainly felt that with you, because we're quite different. Like, we are great friends, but we are never meant to do things together from a work point of view, because we're at polar opposites on lots of things, right? I'm very much like, I like things to be the same and I like it to fit into these little boxes, and I like everything being prepared and ready. And we found when we did the podcast together that sometimes great friendships don't lead to great business. And that's another thing that I've really admired about you, is that you have, in other sense, taken a lot of people that you have great friendships with and great business relationships with. And I've seen that being a real undoing of a lot of people. And I mean, I've been through it as well, a breakup of a business, and it's difficult, mate. And I guess, how have you managed to navigate that challenge of friendship and business and the blur that's come from there, when you are quite a different cat, which is...
It's true. You've hit it on the head. Like, I'd say that, going, like, I think when I wanted to start the business, if I look at two sentences, it was do something that you love and do it with people that you love. And that was how I guess, enthusiastically embarked on that journey. And it's like with all things, there's some amazing benefits in working with people that you're close to and that you're friends with. And like, there's passion there. There's a level of care. There's a level of loyalty and trust. And there's all these intangibles that you just probably can't find in a normal traditional working relationship. And I think you see that a lot with startups, where nearly every great startup story has that group of friends, or, parents helping out, that cousin coming in and doing deliveries and whatnot, but I think what inevitably does happen is that business does change relationships. Like if I look at that now, 6-7 years in, like there's some amazing pros to that, but it doesn't mean that it always works either. Like I've had personal relationships that haven't, played out how I would have hoped when we originally embarked on it. And if I look back on that journey, they would still be the things that are probably the most difficult that I've had to deal with. Like it's not the finances, or whether that partner leaves, or if you don't make that target, or whatever the business stuff is. Like I think the people stuff, it has the biggest impact. But then on the flip side, as the business changes and evolves and grows, you then also learn that, all right, well, that personal relationship, and there's a difference between the personal relationship and the working relationship. And then how do you design that? How does the role evolve? How do positions change? How do you bring people in? How do you manage legacy and that culture that's embedded? Like there's all these different bits and pieces. And I'll definitely say that I think if you look at it across the board, no one's figured that out, in terms of like, I don't think anyone would say that categorically don't ever work with anyone that you're friends with or a family member. And I don't think anyone would categorically say go the other way either. I think it's a combination and a mix, and it's finding that. But I'm still off the view where if I've got the choice of working with somebody that I'm going to get along with, that I want to spend time with, that I'm inspired by, that I can see is committed to growth and action, like I'm taking that 9.5 times out of 10, rather than the person who is the most qualified, has the technical experience, but we don't have a connection or common values. So it might be to my detriment at times, but I'd still go down that path all the time, I guess.
It's interesting because, I mean, both can work and both can fail. And I think it's just being open to that next one. And something that I've definitely changed a lot of in the last, let's say 5 years, right? Like I was pretty bad at being, that didn't work out, I'm never doing that again. So, I mean, I went into business with someone, it didn't work out, I'm never having a business partner again. Like I was very binary and black and white, and it was pretty immature, but it was a way of protecting myself from ever feeling that, that level of pain, because it hurt so much. Like it was devastating, and it took a long time to recover. And like you said, those personal relationships are the ones that sting the most, right? Like when things fall off in the wayside, you put on a brave face when you're doing your business and your day-to-day stuff. You put your big boy, your big girl pants on, you go and do your job. But there's a pain there that doesn't go away when you know that there's something that's not how you want it to be. So I definitely understand what you're saying there. And I think it'd be interesting to see, and, rewinding it to where it was just starting out to where it is now, fast forward 5 years time, when you might be 10 times staff-wise the same. At some point it's going to fall off, right? Like in terms of that, if you, I mean, you're a forward thinker of how does it look in 10 years when maybe it's not as tight knit as what it once was?
Yeah, I think, it's really hard to predict on that, because even if you look at how the just business world is at the moment, it's, I think, just going back to what I've learned a lot more about is my role as, call it the CEO, because and I never used to delineate it between being a friend, a CEO, and the owner of the business. Whereas just recently, and this is one of the big things where I've just learned the real value of like external advisors and having the assistance of people that are a bit outside of my space or my world, where I don't really have that close established personal relationship, but it's more of a formal objective business relationship, but they're not within the business. And they've just helped sort of teach me around, what my role needs to be. All right, when you've got that CEO hat, these are the things where objectively your responsibility is for these 3 or 4 different things. Then you can be the friend outside of that. When you've got your owner's hat, your responsibility are these 3 or 4 different things. And I think it's just getting used to that. So I guess going back to your question around what does it look like in 10 years or 15 years time, I think it's just, I wouldn't even project it that far. It would just be, well, what's the strategy look like? What's the opportunity look like? What does the business need? If there is somebody where there is a close connection or there's a personal relationship and they've got the skill set to be able to achieve that outcome, perfect. If not, I I think naturally I'm more inclined that I'll probably build a relationship with someone for a year or two and then know that they're in that hitting zone so that the
Yep.
personal relationship's being built. But then when the time's right to pull that trigger, I feel like it happens nearly organically.
Yep.
And there's nearly, again, a natural progression of, all right, well, here's the business now. For some reason we met. It's now evolved to this. Here's an opportunity. Are you interested? But I think what I'm getting better at is just clearly defining the terms of that engagement and that relationship and what it looks like. Whereas I think when you're early days startup and you're in that, you just don't know how it's going to pan out. So you go in there with this naive optimism, and I think as an entrepreneur, you have to do it where it's like, look, yep, let's just do this. It's going to be this, this, and this. And if it pans out like 50% like that, that's amazing. But the reality is more often than not, it's not going to be exactly what you pictured. And I think that's sometimes where expectations can be missed.
Yep.
And that's the mistake we make. And that probably happens in a lot of roles, right? And I just go back to alignment, is aligning the role with the person, with the time, with the opportunity. And that's a never ending cycle where it's always being readjusted.
It's an interesting one because having these communities that are so passionate, like, I mean, there's that shared connection around golf in the first place, right?
Yep.
So, and I think for most of the people that are part of Future Golf now came through being members themselves. Would that be fair? Like they were a member first and then saw what you were doing and believed in what they were doing there and then became part of the team, right? So there's that shared passion that's there first. And then something's evolved. And I love this idea as the future of where business is going, that you've got these communities of people that share something in common. They are passionate about something and they're also really good at something else. And it's just about aligning both of those to say, look, you could be a accountant, but if you're an accountant for a startup golf business, you're still lodging tax returns and doing bookkeeping and that sort of thing, but there's a connection to what you're passionate about. So it makes it a little bit easier. So mate, we may not be able to all find, I call it the AFL mentality, not all of us get paid a shitload of money to kick a footy round for a lot of the years, right? So maybe that's the new thing, that instead of passion businesses, you don't have to start, but maybe find someone that is doing something that you love and do what you're really good at for something that you're passionate about, if that makes sense.
I think, you've hit it on the head. And I think that's what just everyone's looking for, right? Like you want alignment, going back to that word, where if you can find your work situation or your job situation and it ticks more than just the salary or you being able to practice your vocation, if it then ticks the box of, I like their culture, I like their product, I like their leadership style, I like the way that they work, I like the story or whatever it is, surely that has to lead to greater performance. And if you look at the companies that have done it the best, it seems like that thread does exist, whether it's Apple or it's Nike or, you look at those bigger companies, even though that they're huge, but they've nearly scaled passion and commitment to the vision and the cause at the most extreme level. Like there's very few companies or brands that I think are aspirational that don't have that, whether it's Tesla, like you think about all of those. I think a large portion of that workforce would probably still work there, even if they weren't being paid. Like obviously they're huge companies, but I think that's when you've nearly hit the alignment sweet spot, when the financial result or the commercial outcome that you get from doing that is important, but it's just such a small factor that at the end of the day, you'd still probably do it anyway. And that's when I think you know that you're in the right seat. And it's maybe a good test for people that are listening at home. Like, well, say if I wasn't getting anything for this for 2 months or 3 months, will I still do it? Or would it be a complete just categorical no, because I'm just not that passionate about it?
Probably a pretty good test with everything that's going on in our world. It's like many people may have been faced with that question, if you were paid a reduced wage, if your hours are reduced, because I mean, at the end of the day, I saw Carly, she got put down to 1 day a week of pay during COVID, but she was working more than I'd ever seen her work. And that wasn't something, I don't think that at the time at the business she was at, there was that, connection to, hey, I love these guys. I really believe everything that they're doing. But there was that sense of pride in what she did, that she didn't want to let her output and let the people around her down. So it's funny what we feel obliged to do versus what we want to do. And I just think it'd be a lot easier if we could all get into that space, or at least think that we're moving towards that right direction. But again, it's tough, mate, isn't it? You know, like if I've got 2 young kids, a massive mortgage, and I'm in a job that's paying me really well, and it's the middle of COVID, maybe I don't have that luxury of being able to do it. But I guess sucking it up and getting through it for a bit, isn't it? Maybe, and then being honest with yourself and saying, look, okay, I'm doing this for a period of time, and then I'm really going to allow myself to look for something else when I can, or plan a way out. And speaking of that, I mean, how did you do that? Was it a calculated plan? Was it a time frame thing? Because you did do that jump, right? You went from, not that you had the traditional 9-to-5 role, but it was, you had an employed role, and then made the leap to do it on your own. And what was your thought process? Was it calculated? Was it strategic? Was it just a feel? Like,
I think I go pretty much on intuition a lot of the time. I think feel is right. I'm just a big believer that things have chapters, and then it changes. You know, like if you look at it, if there's, say, resistance to change or really accepting of change, I'd probably a lot more on the looking at the acceptance of change side. And to me, not many things feel completely fixed. And I think that was probably what was happening around that period of time where, it sort of happened organically again, where Future Golf, Gen Y Golf at that point had been around for a few years. It was just a real hobby project that we would do outside of it. And it was just getting closer to the point where it was like, all right, well, it wouldn't be that big a risk. Like there was still a risk factor involved, but it wasn't a catastrophic risk if we went down the path of giving this a full-time crack. And I think when it got to that level of comfort, and it never gets to a full on 100% level of comfort, but this was probably about a 50, 60% level of comfort, it just felt like, well, now's the time to start making that jump. And it just, as it happened, you know, organically, the traditional role was changing a little bit. That was sort of diminishing. So it crossed over nearly, you know, at the same time. And I think that the really tricky thing is, it's especially when you've got a job that you really, really do like, and it does have those elements of job security, financial security for your family, making that decision to make the jump. It's the equivalent of bungee jumping or skydiving. But I think with every big change in our lives, there is that moment where you just have to go into the unknown a little bit. And that's probably what that felt like. But it's hilarious. It's like with most things. It's like once you do it, like, well, we're in now, and you can't regret it. You very rarely do. Like most people that I speak to, if they're in a job that, say, they dislike, for example, that they stew on for years about leaving it and trying something else, very rare when they go through the process of finding a new one where that person regrets leaving a job that they hated prior to it. So, but there's that element of fear. Like I would say 80, 90% of people still will stay in there for a significantly longer time than probably what they should have. You know, when you just speak to people, and I have a lot of these chats because people are always asking, like probably the number one message or conversation I get is that question. It's like, well, how do you go and pursue your passion? How do you do something that you care about? Because, and especially that comes from people that maybe aren't enjoying their current work situation that much. And my recommendation is always, well, look, if you're not aligned with what you're doing right now, and 70, 80% of the time that you're there and you're not enjoying it, you're not doing something that you feel is adding value, or you're not being valued, it doesn't mean that anyone's done anything wrong. It just probably means that you need to review that and then make a change or explore something a little bit different. So, yeah.
And I know that it is a common question that you get asked, almost to the point that you've documented it and put it together as a course, right? In terms of the things that people can actually go through the process and the exercise of uncovering what it is that they're passionate about and having a framework for pursuing that. Is that, I guess, in essence, what the scratch you've tried to itch, I guess, or the itch you tried to scratch rather.
the scratching, the itchy and scratching. Yeah.
You know what I meant.
I think, I think you've nailed that one on the head where it's COVID happened and I've always been passionate. Like even if I look at the broader picture around starting Gen Y Golf and Future Golf and starting passion-based businesses, I think the longer term vision has always been that, well, can I use this as an example to help other people do similar things? Whereas, like it's nearly as big a driver as what it is to create a really amazing golf business or golf community would be that thing around, well, is this an example that maybe helps other people go down a similar path? And I think that, that was a big question that I'd get is, well, how did you start Future Golf? How did you go through that process? And it's really hard to nut through that in an hour phone call or over a coffee. And you can't do it justice where you go through that process. So I guess just because I've thrown a few different passion-based business starts, about 5 to 10 of them, lose count, I started realizing that the process is pretty similar in terms of actually getting from idea to launch. It doesn't really change all that much. There's a certain sequence of actions and moves that you can take that at least give you the framework of being able to get to the point of launch. Now that doesn't mean that it means that your business is going to be successful, because in all likelihood, it probably won't. That's just the reality of it. But if you get it right, and then you commit to that process, and then you commit to the next step of it for another 12 months or 2 years, you're now giving yourself a pretty significant chance with foundations to at least know that it's no longer just an idea that sits in your head. And I've had things that I've launched just because I wanted to try the product myself, like, the wallet and a few different bits and pieces, where I've gone through the process of creating those things. And it's cool because if you do it in a low risk manner where you using a very lean launch process or creation process, you don't feel the feeling of failure if it doesn't work either. And that's kind of a nice thing, especially if it's your first time that you're embarking on this path, or if you're looking at just starting something on the side. And that's what I've tried to develop, is just a really low risk, no frills, no bells and whistles. Here's how you can get a product or a service that has a value inside of it, and then go and validate it. See if other people want it. See if you can find 5 people that might want to pay you for this, or 50 people that might want to engage with this thing. And then from there, you've got the foundations to make the decision of, do I want to go down this path of entrepreneurship or not? And worst case scenario, you'll be able to utilize those skills in your job. So that's kind of what I've tried to put together in the course. It's just version 1 at the moment, but I think it does cover the core parts of it. Like if you're sitting there today, you and me could nut out an idea, go through that and get something launched probably within 2 to 4 hours is what I'd say.
And I think that's interesting at these times. I mean, in the finance world, I guess there's 2 trains of thoughts. There's either you make more money or you spend less money to accumulate more wealth, like that. And then it's what you do with it to accelerate that and pull levers. And I've always been a bigger fan. And if you ask Carly, like I'm always a bigger fan of make more. Like I've always backed myself to be able to make more. In reality, it hasn't worked in a lot of the times, because like, with businesses, they're just hungry beasts, right? You've got other things that draw your attention, and then you get to a certain level, you need to put more staff on, or you need to invest in a new website, which like I know you did and I did, and systems and back end and that sort of thing. And I think business is a funny thing. You put off all the enjoyment for so long in the hope one day that there's this magical payoff down the track. But along the journey, you just need to make sure that you're enjoying every little step. Sure. But I think from you and I are different in that sense, where the course that you've developed will help people to start something. And I think, like you said, this is version 1. I know you've spoken to me about what it took to get it out there. And I think that's the big thing that I do admire about you, is that not only have you thrown darts, like not only have you picked up the darts, you've thrown them. And I think a lot of people pick them up and don't throw. And that's where I reckon you're elite at throwing. Not
accurate.
No. Like I think we'd both admit that. I don't think you actually need to be accurate, because you get accurate by trying. And a professional dart player no one's accurate from day one. Now, it's a really good example, because the only way to get accurate is to keep throwing. So,
for sure. Well,
I know you've
we'll
done a
look
lot
back
of
at,
different things.
and you look back at, like, I remember always loving Leonardo da Vinci's story, where he never really finished all that much stuff.
No.
If you look at Da Vinci, like, what, there's maybe 3 paintings, 4 paintings, designs these amazing things. But I love his story, like Einstein's story, where it's just fully driven by curiosity. And it's not, I don't think they were ever at any point thinking about the outcome of what they were doing. Like, they're obviously masters at their craft, but I think there was just this elite level of curiosity. And as soon as they were curious, they would go act on it, and they would go practice whatever it was. They would design it. It wasn't really based on any structure, or they had mentors. Like, they used the people around them, but then they kind of thought of things a different way. And I love that kind of narrative and that approach to life, where you just sort of follow your own itch, as you mentioned before, and you see where the curiosity takes you, and you then, if it turns into an amazing outcome, great. But I think the danger is when people get too tied up to the outcome and what it is that they're going to receive from building or creating that thing, and it results in a lack of flexibility and fluidity that you probably do need, especially in the business world, or with anything. It's like with golf as well. As soon as you start thinking that, I'm going to hit every single shot to that one point, doesn't really work. The golf gods will just not allow you to do that. Whereas when you rock up to the course and you're nice and free and relaxed, you can go out there and sometimes good things happen. Like, I think that's...
I think, mate, and I know you well enough to know that there's a structure behind the freedom. I think Jocko Willink's book's about that, but what are the things, and how did you get to that point where, I know you track a lot of stuff in Evernote, so there's a structure to what you do, but that gives you the freedom that you can do with the thinking time and your trips to Japan, where you've literally gone and read and walked street in New York and become a samurai. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, I'm not kidding. You actually did, didn't you? I saw
that
you.
was fun.
In your Jordans.
Jordans.
Samurai
That's
Jordan.
a perfect match. Yeah. Air Samurai.
But what is where does that cross over, and how much do you, like, if you were to look at it as a pie, what's the sort of percentage of organized versus freedom that you like to try and get to?
Yeah, a lot more structure nowadays than probably what I would have had even 2-3 years ago when we were doing things like the podcast. I think I have to trick myself that I've got freedom cognitively, but I actually do have a lot of structure. So say, for example, the way that my brain works, if I look at tomorrow and I think that, oh, mate, I've got to put in 2 14-hour days in a row, I will nearly get paralyzed by that thought.
Yeah.
Whereas what will happen organically, if I'm going in just doing what I'm doing, I'll end up doing 2 14-hour days anyway. And there'll be a more hidden structure behind that. So it's nearly like fooling yourself into feeling those freer moments. And then, like structuring it up, like a 2-week trip to Japan, like there's structure around it. There's some planning that needs to be, especially when you've got a young family. But then once you're there, it's then just, even then it's structured around walking or reading or journaling or thinking, but it's nearly like structured innovation nearly, or reset. So I think going back to what you said earlier around what sort of tools do I use, I'm really big on planning and review, and huge on the 80-20 rule in terms of always trying to review that. All right, if I've got 50 different options or 20 different options, trying to nail in on what are those top 4 or 5 that I need to focus my time and energy. And then once I pick those 4 or 5, I'll allow a pretty high level or degree of freedom within those 4 or 5 things. But it's just like you put the North Stars there, but then the how and the what, that's cool. That can be fluid. So I don't structure that up too much. Like, I won't be breaking down my day at the moment in 20-minute or 30-minute blocks. No. But it will be that, all right, well, these 4 or 5 things will happen every single day. And that's just fixed. I'll journal in my Evernote. I'll take stock of the day. I'll think about the 3 to 5 things that I have to do in that day. I use Asana a lot as well, which is my sort of personal management tool. It has everything, all the different ideas, goals, strategies, plans. They're in like chronological order as well. Every month I'll review those every week, every Sunday. I'll review those. So I spend a lot of time in the thinking and the planning and the strategizing around where I'm going to put the time and the effort, so that I don't feel like I'm being pulled in a lot of different directions or being really reactive. But then it feels fluid as well. But yeah, I think you're right. It's the paradox, right? It's like structured freedom.
Well, I think that's why I asked you the question, because I think you've perfectly tricked yourself. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because
I have to.
Yeah, and I think that's the element that I've gone through different cycles of like doing, like you said, like I'll map out my whole day and I've like got this between this time, this time, this time, this time. But like you said, things don't go to plan, right? Like I'm not going to be calling Bill Smith between 10:20 and 10:30 every day. Like my life cannot be that regimented. But if I know that I have to call Bill Smith that day and 4 other things, I know that I'll get them done just at some point. And knowing that all I have to do is write down those things that I know I'm moving forward to my goals, and filling it in that way has made it a lot easier for me too. And you put it perfectly there too, in terms of tricking yourself. And that's what you helped me do, is in terms of not only articulate, but to trick myself and to understand which of the measurements I actually need to be keeping and which ones are just stupid. I know you've done this for a number of people, and the stuff that you did with me was amazing. Like just sitting down, we don't often do it in terms of being able to articulate what we're doing ourselves. But are there any things that you found in common between people that come up regularly, that are things that you've found that are really repetitive things across multiple people?
Yeah, like in terms of like to get to that point of managing time and effort and energy,
just traits of people where they're like, okay, well, these are really big breakthroughs that if you focus in on this, or just things that you found that have been very common and also big.
Yeah, for sure. And I mentioned this a couple of times, is I think, and this happens a lot with high performers and people that are very good at what they do, is that they lose sight of the bigger picture around who they are and why it is that they're doing what they're doing. And I think it's because they're so good at their craft and their vocation, and they commit so much time to sharpening that part of their life. It means that they don't get the opportunity to look at the whole thing holistically from the top. So what I really do with a lot of people nowadays is it's nearly like you create a strategy or a business strategy, but for yourself. And it's a life strategy. It's where you sit down and you start mapping out what your sort of why is, your values are, what you're really about, what are your major KPIs in your personal life and your professional life. And it helps people, I think, stop separating work and life balance. Because if you think about it, you get so much more of that in your professional life or in your working life, where that structure, that strategy, that direction, it's all kind of defined for you. So you don't have to do the hard thinking yourself. Whereas for a lot of people that I speak to, they haven't really spent any time or much time on thinking about themselves as a business or as an entity that they need to then serve and nourish and put into a really good spot. So I go back to that alignment piece. And if you look at the biggest trend that I find, is that when people sit there and they really jot down all the things in their life and what's going on and where they want to head and the things that they want to do, there's usually only 3 to 5 different themes that come out. Like people will sit there and they'll have 100, 200, 300, maybe 400 data points, that have family, work, health, whatever it is. But then when you really nut it down and you try to find somebody's truth, it's maybe 4 to 5 different things. And then that's usually tied to maybe 1 to 3 key results. Mm-hmm. And if they hit those 3 results, they will generally come to a conclusion that I can nearly wipe away 70, 80, 90% of all the other stuff that I thought that was important. And if I just focus on these 3 or 4 things, life's going to be pretty good. And if I amplify those even further, then life's going to be amazing. So it's trying to find that alignment with people. And usually you can find it pretty quick. You can find someone's truth because they're either bullshitting themselves and they're lying to themselves about something just because they're a bit off track for where they need to be due to a series of decisions and actions, or they're really close to it and they just can't see it properly, or they're not appreciating it, or they're not grateful for what it is. So I know it's a bit esoteric, but it's funny. Like, we've done that exercise. You could do it on a piece of paper and within an hour or two, can unlock some pretty cool things. And those things change as well. They change. It's completely different exercise when you're doing it in the middle of COVID to what it is in a different environment. It's a different exercise if you're speaking to somebody that's having a massive breakup with their loved one. It's a different, if someone's moving to a different country, like all these things have different variables. But I think the core of what people want doesn't change too much. Like I'm a big believer that every single individual has something that they're about. And then it's just about how do you live your life in alignment with that as much as you can.
Yeah. And I think, oh mate, it's like, the challenge is when you're in these things, like you're in COVID or you're going through a breakup or things are tough. Like, you know, when you're in the middle of it and you literally just don't feel like you have 5 minutes and then like you just don't, how am I going to have time to sit down and write a list of 200 things? But not having done it and putting it off for so long, doing things like this is the thing that actually gives you the way out.
It is.
You know, and if you don't actually take that step to consciously step back and sit down, mate, it's money, it's business, it's relationships, it's fitness, it's everything, right? And just sit back and go like, do you know, mate, I've been trying to run during COVID and I absolutely hate it. Like I legitimately do not like running one bit and I keep pushing myself to do it. And I've got on my list of things to do every day, like and I'm like, nah, like, and I've tried to compete with myself. I've tried listening to stuff. I've tried running different loops and I just can't find it. Like, it's just not for me. So I think it's just trying to find that next thing and step back and go, instead of trying to force myself to like something, there's another way of doing this that I'd actually enjoy it more. And, I don't know, like it's been an interesting time to think and it's a scary time to think sometimes too, because the more time you have, the more you just dream, right? But then it comes back to those things that you need to do each day and move things forward. And I have been definitely really impressed with the way that you can get to that core for people very quickly. And I think you've got a very unique ability of calling out people's bullshit, like you said it, in terms of seeing through it. But I think that's interesting because you don't often do that, right? Like there's not many people that have that ability to pull it apart.
Yeah, well, and you can't do it like, that's why I don't really do that with many people either, because it's quite a confronting thing unless you know you've got that relationship, like and you don't know how it's going to play out, like what you can unlock when you do find that, call it that truth, or you know you uncover a lot of the bullshit. But I think it's something that I think the world is moving towards anyway. You know, when you look at the trends that are happening right now, like people are meditating and they're journaling and they're doing all these sort of things for self-care that I think moves it in the right direction, where you don't see people, like the people have got better tools at their disposal probably than ever before to manage things like stress and anxiety and a lot of these things that are common. Like even if you look at COVID, like I've seen so many people just make so many proactive moves throughout COVID that I know, where it's like, that's awesome. They've used this experience to develop a skill, to learn more about themselves, to realize that commuting 3 hours every day wasn't the best thing for the last 10 years. And they might look at changing that up. They've experienced working from home. They've experienced going for walks every day that they haven't done for maybe 20 years. So it's just approaching life with that mindset of, all right, well, what's at my disposal? What can I play with? Where am I at right now? And how do I then design that so it's most aligned with what I'm about?
And I think it's hard. I mean, as a person who has a team like you do, I've had to change a lot of my expectations on stuff. You know, like the work day now isn't 9 to 5, and I don't mean that because it's longer than that. I mean that sometimes the home life comes into the work life and you just have to be cool with that, right? Like there's going to be a knock at the door because the DHL guys come, or, there's going to be interruptions that come up. People have kids. They need to do these different things. There's homeschooling. I think that there's still going to be that element of people that are working for people, and it might be even tougher, like, yes, I don't really like commuting 3 hours a day, but my boss is so determined on making sure that we're in the office together. And that's going to be a real challenge when, particularly here in Victoria, a lot of the other states have already opened back up. I saw Westpac's renting out, 7 of their 28 floors. They're doing these sorts of things. not everyone's going to be going back to the office, but some people will be forced to by the dinosaur boss, and it's going to be a challenge to, I guess, talk about it, you know?
Oh, yeah, I think the working world's about to have such a massive change where even if you look at those that are going to go down that virtual or remote working space, like we've been doing it for the last few years, and there just really isn't much of a case study, or there isn't all that much research on a large number of organizations that have operated under that. And what we will start to see is, call it the traditional role, I think is going to shift significantly within the workplace. Because even if you look at companies that are very, very big companies that are going down this, where previously when everyone was going into the office, it was construed as this flexible working environment, they're all moving to time tracking software and project management tools, hourly check-ins. Like, it'll be interesting to see what it then looks like from what's expected from an input and output perspective, especially for companies where that are large. Like, how do you scale flexibility to still get whatever needs to be done, and how do people keep connected? Because that's the biggest thing that happens is, I think when people are disconnected from their colleagues and they're not seeing them, it's really hard to stay motivated. And yeah, you can do Zoom calls and you can do all these bits and pieces, but there will be a shift for the broader organizational world where I think it's going to be I don't know, just summing that up, it's going to be a new working world where people might have 2-3 different jobs. They'll split how they use their time. Might be more of a freelance type of mentality. So
I was just flicking through, mate. I was trying to find something to show you, and it was one of the things that made me the most proud recently. It was so we don't have a huge team, as you know, but we've always been remote. Carly's in Mildura, Sam's in Philippines, we've got people in Brisbane, people around the place. Carly sent me a photo, and it was Sam and her playing their Nintendo Twitch on a Friday afternoon. Like they'd taken a photo. That was Zoom Switch. I'm getting confused.
You're gonna get sued by Nintendo, mate. I just was protecting you there.
I just sounded like an absolute granddad. I remember my day, we didn't have Twitches.
I know you're a couple of years older than me, man, but what's happened?
Mate, I turned into a dinosaur. But they sent the photo of themselves over Zoom playing on a Friday afternoon, just chilling out.
That's awesome.
And honestly, I would have always, if I was being honest, said that I'm not a very good leader of people. I've had a lot of people that I've worked with in the teams, and they've all not worked out. And the only common denominator between the 7 or so people that haven't worked is me, right? So that took a long time to sort of come to grips with, that what I do has an impact on the other people. And now that we've got a really good team, there's that sort of thing that's there. It's like, it's really fun to sort of see that there too. And mate, I've learned a lot from the way you do it, because the guys are sharing a lot of the stuff they're doing. They're posting, they're part of Future Golf. They're believing in the brand and what you stand for. And I have learned a lot from watching you do that. And I think you've been really successful at, it's not just you, it's much bigger than that. And people seem to get that. And, you know, it doesn't take too long to sort of see that it's something that lots of people believe in and love. So, mate, it's kudos to you, mate. I think you've done an amazing job at that.
Yeah, well, and it's always a work in progress, right? Like, and I think the biggest thing there is, and you touched on it, is I think leadership is something that just evolves, and there's so many different ways to go about it. Like, some people are just amazing day-to-day managers, you know, and in terms of once a project's in there, they'll get the outcome, and they're in there every day, every hour. They're helping, they're guiding it, they're coaching it. I think others set the vision, they set the strategy, they lead by just moves, you know, or media or PR through storytelling. Like, yeah, I think when I look at you, I'd disagree. I'd say that you are a great leader, because you lead by automation and by creating a business where your staff and your team members do less of the manual stuff or the work that people hate, because I know you hate that so much. You hate ineffective systems and processes. So I would imagine working for you, if you're somebody that's a self-starter and or autonomous and, you know, just about following the strategy and implementing on it, they're going to have a pretty good relationship working with you, because you're not going to make them do a lot of the crappy stuff, or you're going to automate it and you're going to sort it out rather than going down that path. So I think there's multiple ways, and we all probably have a natural style that we go through. Like mine's probably pretty helicopterish. Like I'll come in when there's a strategy to be designed and developed, when there's structures that need to be changed, when there's vision that needs to be optimized or whatever it is. But I then largely leave once I'm comfortable with how it sits, I'll largely move away. But then I'll go in really deep for a little bit, and then I'll let it go for a bit, then come back in. Now, I don't know whether that's good or not, but it's just the style that I kind of use. But yeah, leadership, it's such an interesting topic.
And on that, mate, you said something interesting to me the other day, and I think you were joking. It's just that I think you said you've read so many books that they all started to become the same. And I know you're a big consumer and a big reader. I think that a lot of us could relate to that, whether it be reading or watching or whatever it might be at this time. We feel like we've finished stuff. But what are your sort of thoughts on that in terms of picking up things, doing daily learning, that sort of thing? Because I know that's been a big part about what you've done in the last period of time.
Yeah, it's probably one of the only things that I've done consistently for the last 4 or 5 years is reading or learning something every day for at least half an hour, an hour. And yeah, you're right. Like, especially if I'm looking at some of the topics, and that was more a comment around, I think I've been focusing on about 5, 6, maybe 8 topics for the most part during that period. And I think it's just that you see things repeat.
Yeah.
You know, so, or maybe it's even just there's a more embedded component of that knowledge now. So I think that's probably what that trend is. And I love that, because it means that now when I'm reading something, I'm not reading it for that initial beginner's mind shock value a lot of the time. It's really to find that last 5 or 10% of insight. And then, like Vin, one of our mates, he uses this terminology a lot. It's like it's like the second level of reading, where you're now using that book to think and problem solve and action other things. You're not actually using the book to collect the information at the base level. It's more around how to use that to then actually find additional insight that isn't really in the book. And I think that's cool. It's like when you do anything for a long period of time and you get to that point. So I love it. I love that books are now changing in the way that I kind of consume them and use them. But I'm a big fan of actioning books. I'm pretty pragmatic with books. I like books that have something that you can take away and then you can go and test and utilize.
I was going to say that there's a lot of connections I draw, and I know I do it a lot. The jiu-jitsu connection to that, it's, they talk about the black belt, they still feel they're learning, but they're not thinking about like their breathing or the positioning stuff that they need to do and I can't speak as a black belt, but do you know what I mean? They're not thinking about the same things that I am. Like, I'm legitimately just trying to work out how not to die, like really, under someone's weight. And they've gone well beyond that path, but now they're thinking about a whole lot of different things. It's like they're 15 moves ahead of me. They know the patterns. They can connect the dots before I've even thought about it. And I think that's what you've noticed is the real skill is when you can see the patterns, and when you're finding patterns, you're onto something. And that, they say cliches are so good because they're often true. Like, it's the same as patterns. If the pattern's there all the time, you probably know you're onto something, right? When it comes to that.
Sure. And it helps also distill what's the most impactful information. Like when you see it 5, 6, 7, 8 times, and it's a common theme over and over again, it then starts solidifying that, well, this is now proven. And especially when you read over a really long horizon of time. Like, so that's one of the things I started doing a little while ago, where it's not just reading books that were written in the last 5 years or 10 years or 50 years. It's like, let's start looking back 500 years, 1,000 years, 2,000 years. And when you start seeing patterns that repeat over, a couple of millennium, then it's like, all right, well, these are not universal laws, but they're pretty solidified principles and concepts that have been effective over and over and over again. Doesn't matter what country you're in, what society you're in. And I think for me, it's like, it just means that you can deal with higher levels of uncertainty. When you know that there's a knowledge base that you can go and access, it's like, all right, well, has this happened before? Yeah, it probably has. Was it exactly the same? No, it wasn't exactly the same. But even if you look at things like the pandemic, this isn't the first time something like this has happened. Like, our grandparents lived through something very similar. Those that, these things have happened over and over again, where the world gets reshaped and it changes. And And that's what I think is really cool, is like when you can learn from that and then use it, like how do you then use it? Throughout, like I think you were talking about it, like, well, you've seen what's happened when there's been economic changes and downturns. Like there's certain moves that the Warren Buffetts and those guys play over and over again, like it's the whole blood on the streets mentality. Like, what do we now invest in? What do we buy? And when the natural reaction would be, well, I need to protect my portfolio. I need to do all those bits. And see, I'm butchering this because I'm not a finance guy, but
no. But the concept's the same though. There's a book called The Richest Man in Babylon. I'm sure you've heard of it. But a lot of the principles that are in there are the same things that Dave Ramsey talks about, which are the same things that Scott Pape talks about. And all they've done is they put a modern spin on these principles. And the reason they work is because they're such good principles, right? But the thing is that most people read one book and then say, I'm going this way and I'm following everything that person now says. And I think that second level of reading, not only do you realize that maybe that's not the source of where things come from, or maybe it is a really good reference point of a modern way of looking at it, but it comes back longer ago than that. And if I dug that little bit deeper, not only am I getting more aware, but I'll be able to start spotting those patterns for myself and not just having to follow what other people say, because nobody gets it right every time. You kind of have to form your own philosophy on things. And it's interesting. Like it's just interesting to see some people come out these days. Like, you've heard of Dave Portnoy, the Barstools guy, the Barstool Sports guy?
Yeah.
Yep. So he's really gone up against Warren Buffett. Like he's saying that he's really started to challenge his thinking. He's saying like, mate, he's right. He's like an 86 or 90-year-old man. Like and he keeps saying that he's beyond his prime. And he goes, I'm not saying anything I don't mean here, because I'd hope that he's beyond his prime, but it's just because it's like picking on your granddad, that it feels so weird. And he's had such a long journey of being successful that it just is a bit of an offbeat comment. But I mean, it's interesting to see these guys come in and bring a different spin on things. And a lot of it's marketing, right? Like the guy's an absolute elite marketer, but there's, it's just a weird world at the moment in terms of what we're living in and seeing.
Well, if there was a perfect way to do something, like we would all just do it that way. Like if there was like the perfect religion, the perfect school, the perfect education system, the perfect way to parent, like life would be pretty simple. There'd be a rule book that would be really just solidified, and every single person in the world would use it and they'd go down that path. So I think that there's very little in the world that's just black and white and binary and fixed. And I think that it's more around having that mindset of, well, this person says it this way, this person says it this way, this person says it this way. What do I think? And what am I willing to try or test? And I think that's the biggest thing. You mentioned it before, like I had a bad business relationship. Oh, that means that I just don't go into business again. I think that type of thinking becomes not dangerous, but it just limits your possibilities and the options there. Whereas when you look at COVID right now, the ones that I think are probably thriving the most are the people that are willing to think outside the box a little bit. Those that are really stuck in what was the previous pre-COVID world and their version or their image of what that felt like and seemed like, I've found that they're struggling the most, but those that are willing to sort of open the horizons and look at different options, different ways to do things, I think they'll generally, in times of great change like this, they do a little bit better, both emotionally and internally, but also probably from a performance mindset as well.
Mate, I am conscious of time. I didn't realize I'd already gone over. I'm sorry for stealing extra time from you.
I'll chat with you all day. You know that.
And we do.
There is no time.
I know.
But I was like, we've been speaking for about 2 minutes, even though
I know. But
those listening are probably like, will these guys shut up or not?
I'm going to put a couple of links in that people can find if they do want to check out the course. And you've been very kind to offer through a discount there. So I think it's $100 off you offered, which was very generous of you, mate. So
it's a course for $100. So
that's very nice of you.
It's $300 off, mate. Let's say I think. Oh, sorry, can't remember what it's at.
Anyway, there's a discount there. Check it out. Have a look. Very kind of you. If they want to find I'll put your website there. I'll put Future Golf if anyone's interested as well. I mean, golf's just opened back up in Victoria. I know a lot of people are passionate about getting back out there. One of the few things that we can do. If there's anyone that wants to do that, I would strongly suggest having a look at it if you didn't want to go down the bricks and mortar style thing, mate. But as always, I love talking to you, and I'm very grateful for the changes that you've helped me uncover about myself, mate. And thank you, genuinely.
And same to you, bud. You've been such a good mate, and love what you're doing with this and the lives, and
It's good fun.
even this, mate. It's just so Craig Bigelow. Like, I love that you had videos set up. You've got the screen set up. Like, there's probably a process that kicks in after you click stop. It goes to all the different people.
It's very funny you say that. I've got my post-publishing process that gets it into my PPP. I've actually got the list of it. You know me too well, mate. But
mate, I love it. You've taught me so much as well around how things should connect and how to make things a lot more consistent and repeatable. So
it's just a mutual hug fest.
It is a hug fest. But
all right, mate. Thanks. Thank you, brother.
No worries, bro. Well, good luck with this, and we'll speak soon, huh?
Cheers, mate.